Hello and welcome to another lap guide for the iRacing Camel GT series. This week we're at Phillip Island. Here's the lap first. All right, so lap time there is a 1:16.779. Optimal for this session or for this weather that I tested in is about a 1:16.424, and this is late afternoon weather. I've got a track temp of 87 Fahrenheit track temp that I use, and that may be a little bit on the higher end for what we typically see. We'll see how it goes though with the sessions that we get for this week. So let's go ahead and jump back to the start of the lap and go through this turn by turn in more detail. All right, so coming down through turn one, Duhan is all flat out. You can kind of open up the corner a little bit by coming up onto the curbing here. You don't necessarily need to, especially with qualifying fuel, but I think with race fuel, and also to kind of help get you over to the right-hand side, which I think sets up the southern loop a little better. It does help to start wide like that. So I like to kind of just get the left tires up onto the curbing just a bit here to open the corner up here. But this is all flat out, and just kind of getting nice and close to this curbing without getting up on it too much. It's a little bit too unsettling to get up onto that curbing. And getting over to the right here for the southern loop. And the way that I approach the southern loop is to get my braking and downshift into third done before the turning radius starts to kind of sharpen there, because if you brake just a little later and you've started to turn in a little bit more, then it'll actually send the car into a spin pretty quickly there. So you definitely want to get your braking and downshifting done before you start to do a little bit more turning here. So that's about the point that I am braking and downshifting. That's about a 50% braking. So not real hard, just real quick brake, downshift, and then kind of starting from the outside, aiming for the middle here and not trying to get in too tight too soon. It is a late apex, so you want to really just kind of gradually move over and get closer and closer to the left-hand curbing so that you're ready to get on throttle right at about this point. So here's the throttle point right there. And I mean to gradually get on throttle all the way up to full throttle from this point forward. So you really want to get an early throttle on the exit of this corner. The earlier throttle you get, because this is still a pretty long wide open throttle area from here all the way down into Honda corner. So there's full throttle there already, and if you've timed that just right and you come in here with the right angle and hit full throttle, it's going to carry you all the way up to the exit curbing here to the right, and you'll be able to keep your speed up. So let's just go ahead and play that through. Other quick note is, for this corner, I like to go into it with a little extra speed, and then you'll see just some real light modulation of, or just kind of alternating between throttle and brake to get the speed right at about the point where I want it, and then just very, very lightly tapping brakes. Any more brake input than that can actually be just enough to send the car into a spin. So you really want very, very light inputs at this point. You can hear the tires kind of scrubbing here, scrubbing off speed. And with the wing, I'm actually using a 7 wing in this particular setup. And the back end can come around on you pretty quickly if you just carry just a little too much speed and if you brake just a little too much right here at the mid corner point. So you really want very, very light braking, if anything, through this point of the corner as you kind of get the car further and further to the left to make sure that you can get on throttle as close to this, or pretty close to this left-hand curbing. I don't like to get up on the curbing. If you use this curbing on the left, it can actually get a little slippery there too. And again, another possible cause for a spin. So I try to avoid touching the curbing here on the left at all, and you really don't need to get too close to it. So what else is there to note about that? I guess just as far as the setup is concerned, if you're having trouble with traction, you could maybe bump the wing up just a little bit. That might help out a little bit until you get the feel for it, and then maybe try lowering that a little bit. But because this track has so many long wide open throttle straights, I think that it is a little bit more of a mid downforce track. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Although there are some corners here where if you try to remove too much downforce, it gets extremely challenging to hit them consistently. So where I have it is comfortable for me, but you may want to increase or decrease based on how comfortable you are with the downforce that the car has. All right, so we're coming down now through Stoner Corner. This is all full throttle. You're just getting set up on the left for Honda. The braking point is before, or at least for me, it's just before the 100. So I'm going to threshold at about 80% just before that. I found that if I try to run my braking any later than that, that I just couldn't consistently get my turn-in point into Honda where I wanted it to be. Now, I think you could brake a little later in even cooler weather than this. So in this particular situation, obviously this is with qualifying fuel. That's where I was comfortable braking there. So hitting 80% and then starting to trail off from there. Trying to be a little bit patient on turn-in. This is not quite a 90 degree, or I'm sorry, not quite a 180 degree. I think it's probably closer to a 160, 170 degree corner, but it's kind of wide through the middle. You kind of want to apex through the midpoint here and then let the car run wide, kind of pointing toward the exit here. And I didn't quite run it real wide here as I could have, and you'll hear when I play it back again that it kind of comes loose on me a little bit, and then I'm going to short shift in a second. And you can see even just a brief, see the quick correction of the wheel here as it comes a little loose on me. And I think that could have been avoided by just letting the car run a little wider here and not trying to turn away from the curbing too soon there. My thinking here is that I really want to, in some respects, I just want to get the car back to the right because the next corner comes up pretty quickly. And so I think that's why I tended to do that a little bit. And I think that could be avoided, but I did short shift that and not too much time was lost. I found that the car was just quicker on the outlap. In fact, trying to reproduce some of the sector times that I had through this next two corners, Honda and Siberia, were actually a little bit more difficult to reproduce the quicker times there just after the first outlap. And almost always my fastest time through Honda and Siberia here were on the outlap. And so, and I just kind of fiddled with the setup and the tire pressures to see if I could try to improve that, but didn't have a whole lot of success with that. It was just quicker on the outlap there. So in any case, let's go ahead and play this corner back. Okay, so setting up for Siberia, I like to get over on onto the curb here to the right. I don't know if you necessarily have to. One mistake that I think can be made here is turning in late and taking it a little too wide. With the camber that's in the road here, you can actually hug the curb pretty tight here and get quicker and more consistent times around Siberia as long as you're sure to do kind of a later apex here and getting on throttle. You'll see getting on throttle right at about this point. So if we kind of back up a bit, you can see the throttle point is right over here. So it's definitely a later apex. You don't want to get on throttle too soon. What happens is if you get on throttle too soon, then you end up running up into the dirt here. And had a fun little replay in one of these laps where I flipped, kind of lost control into the dirt, went up over this bank, and the car loves to shoot straight up in the air, and I actually landed right on top of this structure. So that was fun, but didn't save it in this replay. So other couple notes about Siberia. It is a downshift now down into second, and you'll see that there's kind of a little bit of a delay, because once you're off brake, you can't really get on throttle. So there's kind of a bit of a coasting moment there. I think that's something that could probably be improved a bit, but you really just have to wait and be patient to get on throttle, and then just let the car kind of slow gradually to keep it close to the curb, so that as you get on throttle, you really want to be as close to this curb as you can, so that you can get to throttle sooner, and then let the car carry all the way over to the exit curbing. And it'll get there really quickly. If you hit the line just a little bit off, then you'll find yourself having to kind of lift or delay throttle to avoid going wide. So coming up wide here on the right is pretty easy to do, and running too wide there happens pretty easily. So let's go ahead and play that one through. All right, so this is all full throttle, just keeping it close to the curbing here through this sector. All right, so coming down to Lucky Heights corner at turn 9, this will be a quick downshift into fourth. I downshift after I've already started my turn in, so I actually get the car turned in, a quick blip, downshift into fourth, very light braking. So the braking is just to kind of help move the weight of the car forward to help get a little bit better turn in. And my train of thought coming through here is just to kind of keep fairly close to the curbing on the left, but stay on throttle the whole time, and just kind of modulate the speed by modulating how much throttle. If you come off throttle completely or abruptly, you'll spin pretty quickly, and you'll be off here into the grass and over to the wall. So you really just want to stay on power through here, and definitely avoid braking as well, to keep it loaded, and to keep from putting the car into a slide, because you're taking this corner really quickly. You can see that the lowest speed is coming down to about 130 or 129. But all the way up to that point, it's actually pretty fast corner. So again, just kind of modulating, keeping relatively close to the curbing here, because as you come around the last portion of the corner toward the hill, your braking is going to be just before you get down the downhill, and this is vitally important to hit right, because I think this corner and the exit to this corner is the most important on the track, and we'll talk about that next. So let's go ahead and play this through. All right, so as I said, setting up here to the left, if you wait and you brake after you've already descended down the hill, then the car locks up really, really easily, and you'll be sliding, and you'll push off and miss your apex, and you'll lose a lot of time. So what you really want to do is you want to start your braking where you can get a little bit more efficient done prior to the downhill, prior to the car lightening up, because like I say, as it lightens up down the downhill, you're just going to have much less efficient braking. So plan to get your threshold brake done right before that. And I find that I still can't brake real hard here, so it's less than the 80% or so typical threshold brake in a hard braking zone. We're closer to about I don't know, 65-70%. So I found myself just braking a little less heavy here. Plus, it's kind of early. It feels like a more appropriate braking zone might be further up, like maybe right about this point. But if you try to brake this far ahead, like I say, it's going to lock up really easily as the car lightens up coming down the hill here. So there's the threshold there right before the 50, right before the downhill, and then definitely letting off pretty quickly, especially as the car comes down the hill now. Keeping the car here to the left and down into first gear. I go from fourth down to second and then down to first. You could skip straight to first if you wanted to. That's just the rhythm that I'm using there, and aiming to use all of the latter part of the curving here, just past the midpoint. Use maybe a little more than I would have liked here. You can see it's a little bit rough there, but the tighter you can get in on this corner, the better exit you're going to have, and the sooner you're going to get to throttle. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I think this is the most important corner exit anyway in the entire track, because your exit to this corner and how soon you can get on throttle will affect how much speed you ultimately carry all the way down the front straight of the track. And of course, that is your longest straight and best passing zone. So the sooner you can get on throttle here, so if you run a little wide, that's going to delay throttle. But you really want to get to throttle right away. I think I tend to short shift this into second just because it tends to get a little loose here as the turbo kicks in. So I'll tend to short shift that into second and keeping throttle up a bit, and then having to lift just a little coming around the steeper part of the corner. And then as the curbing flattens out, that's kind of my target for where I want to get back to full throttle, right at around that point. So you'll see that happen right about there. Actually, it's really closer to the end of that, but I'm thinking of, as I reach that, going from around, I don't know, 50-60% throttle to, reaching full throttle pretty soon after that. So that's kind of my target there. And I found that if you exit the corner here and don't get enough throttle early, then the car has actually a little less downforce because you're not approaching this with as much speed, and you end up having to slow the car just a bit more, and you can't be as aggressive on throttle coming off the corner here, and you end up losing quite a bit of speed. As you come across the corner, go ahead and use all of the curbing here to the right. It's actually really smooth. You can't really feel anything there. It just feels like part of the road. So it's not rough, it's not bumpy, but use that as part of the road. And that way, as you come back to full throttle sooner here, you can let the car run wide safely without risking a spin. So let's play that through, starting from the braking zone. Another quick thought on this corner here. You don't want to get into the curbing here because it is a little steeper here at the midpoint. But I found that if I just kept the car as close to this curbing as I could, that ensured that as I kind of rounded this part of the corner, and again modulating throttle to find the right amount of speed that keeps the car, from running too wide of the curbing. That way, as soon as I come around this steeper part of the curbing, I'm ready to transition to full throttle as soon as possible, and I think that helps a bit. Also, as I mentioned, I cut this just a little tighter than I'd like. You can see how it kind of bumps a little bit. And I think it could also potentially be improved by getting just a little wider entry. You'll notice how I kind of fade toward the middle of the track here, maybe a little early. I'm not sure if that can be improved a bit, but I think that if you were able to take just a little wider angle into this, then as you come across the curbing here, you might be able to get to throttle a little sooner than that. But anyway, that's just kind of theory there on what I think might be better. But I do think it's an important corner to practice and to get comfortable with, and definitely hit this well, because it's going to really, once you hit full throttle right here, your full throttle from this point all the way down the front straight, all the way down to really southern loop, turn 2 of the track. So this is all full throttle, pretty straightforward here all the way out. It's just going to be using the road. Car gets around the corner relatively easily, and of course you'll be full throttle all the way around turn 1 and down to turn 2. So that's why that corner is so important. So that's, I guess, the entire track, and hope you found it helpful, and talk to you later.